November 23rd, 1991. Dear friend, do you enjoy holidays with your family? I don't mean your mom and dad family, but your uncle and aunt and cousin family. Personally, I do. There are several reasons for this. First, I am very interested and fascinated by how everyone loves each other, but no one really likes each other. Second, the fights are always the same. They usually start when my mom's dad, my grandfather, finishes his third drink. It is around this time that he starts to talk a lot. My grandfather usually just complains about black people moving into the old neighborhood, and then my sister gets upset at him, and then my grandfather tells her that she doesn't know what she's talking about because she lives in the suburbs. And then he says how no one visits him in his retirement home. And finally he starts talking about all of the family secrets, like how cousin so-and-so knocked up that waitress from the Big Boy. I should probably mention that my grandfather can't hear very well, so he says all of these things really loud. My sister tries to fight him, but she never wins. My grandfather is definitely more stubborn than she is. My mom usually helps her aunt prepare the food, which my grandfather always says is too dry, even if it's soup. And her aunt will cry and lock herself in the bathroom. There's only one bathroom in my great aunt's house, so this turns to trouble when all the beer starts to hit my cousins. They stand twisted in bladdered positions and bang on the door for a few minutes and almost coax my great aunt out. But then my grandfather curses something at my great aunt, and then the cycle starts all over again. With the exception of the one holiday when my grandfather passed out just after dinner. My cousins always have to go to the bathroom outside in the bushes. If you look at the windows, it's like I do, you can see them, and it looks like they're on one of their hunting trips. I feel terribly sorry for my girl cousins and my other great aunts because they don't really have the bushes option, especially when it's cold. I should mention that my dad usually just sits real quiet and drinks. My dad is not a big drinker at all, but when he has to spend time with my mom's family, he gets loaded, as my cousin Tommy says. Deep down, I think my dad would rather spend the holiday with his family in Ohio. That way, he wouldn't have to be around my grandfather. He doesn't like my grandfather very much, but he keeps quiet about it. Even on the ride home, he just doesn't think it's his place. As the evening comes to an end, my grandfather is usually too drunk to do much of anything. My dad and my brother and my cousins carry him out to the car of the person who is the least angry at him. It has always been my job to open doors for them along the way. My grandfather's very fat. I remember there was one time that my brother drove my grandfather back to the retirement home, and I rode along. My brother always understood my grandfather. He rarely got angry at him unless my grandfather said something mean about my mom or sister or just made a scene in public. I remember it was snowing really hard and it was very quiet, almost peaceful. And my grandfather calmed down and started talking a different kind of talk. He told us when he was 16, he had to leave school because his dad died, and someone had to support the family. He talked about the time when he had to go to the mill 3 times a day to see if there was any work for him. And he talked about how cold it was, and how hungry he was because he made sure his family always ate before him. Things he said we just wouldn't understand because we were lucky. Then he talked about his daughters, my mom and Aunt Helen. I know how your mom feels about me. I know Helen too. There was one time I went to the mill. No work. None. I came home at 2 in the morning, pissed and pissed. Your grandmother showed me their report cards. C plus average. And these were smart girls. So I went into their room and I beat some sense into them. And when it was done, they were crying. And I just held up their report cards and said, "This will never happen again." She still talks about it, your mother. But, something, it never did happen again. They went to college. Both of them. I just wish I could have sent them. I always wanted to send them. I wish Helen could have understood that. I think your mother did. Deep down. She's a good woman. You should be proud of her. When I told my mom about this, she just looked very sad. Because he could never say those things to her. Not ever. Not even when we walked her down the aisle. When he walked. But this Thanksgiving was different. It was my brother's football game, which we brought a VCR tape of my relatives to watch. The whole family was gathered around the TV, even my great aunts, who never watch football. I'll never forget the looks on their faces when my brother took the field. It was a mixture of all things. My cousin works at a gas station, and my other cousin has been out of work for 2 years since he injured his hand, and my other cousin has been wanting to go back to college for around 7 years. And my dad said once that they were very jealous of my brother because he had a shot in life and was actually doing something about it. But in that moment when my brother took the field, all that washed away. And everyone was proud. At one point, my brother made a very big play on 3rd down, and everyone cheered even though some of us had already seen the game before. I looked up at my dad and he was smiling. I looked up at my mom and she was smiling even though she was nervous about my brother getting hurt, which was strange because it was a VCR tape of an old game and she knew he didn't get hurt. My great aunts and my cousin and their children and everyone were also smiling. Even my sister. There were only 2 people who weren't smiling. My grandfather and I. My grandfather was crying. The kind of crying that is quiet and is secret. The kind of crying that only I noticed. I thought about him going into my mom's room when she was little and hitting my mom and holding up her report card and saying that her bad grades would never happen again. And I think now that maybe he meant my older brother or my sister or me. That he would make sure that he was the last one to work in a mill. I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know if it's better to have your kids be happy and not go to college. I don't know if it's better to be close to your daughter or make sure that she has a better life than you do. I just don't know. I was just quiet, and I watched him. When the game was over and dinner was finished, everyone said that they were thankful, what they were thankful for. I had a lot of it that had to do with my brother or my family or children or God, and everyone meant that they said it regardless of what would happen tomorrow. When it came to my turn, I thought about it a lot because this was my first time sitting at the big table with all the grown-ups since my brother wasn't here to take his seat. I'm thankful that my brother played football on television so nobody fought. Most of the people around the table looked uncomfortable. Some looked angry. My dad looked like he knew I was right, but he didn't want to say anything because it wasn't his family. My mom was nervous about what her dad would do. Only one person at the table said anything. It was my great aunt, the one who usually locks herself in the bathroom. Amen. And somehow that made it all right. When we were all getting ready to leave, I walked up to my grandfather and gave him a hug and a kiss on the cheek. He wiped my lip print off with his palm and gave me a look. He doesn't like the boys in the family to touch him, but I'm very glad that I did it anyway in case he dies. I never got to do that with my Aunt Helen. Love always, Charlie.